a little bit of a history lesson in this clip as well about who sells things off. It's interesting. Obviously in the 80s, it's not everybody, but certainly of recent times. Although you could say in the 80s, there was a certain, I'm going to put air quotes around the Labour minister who then ended up going off and starting ACT. So maybe they weren't really a left-wing politician. They were just, what do you call it? Cosplaying a left-wing politician, and they brought in some right-wing policies. But let's have a look what the conversation on TVNZ tonight was about. And this is part of their polling that they're releasing through the week, and it's all about privatisation.
The privatisation debate is heating up again as some politicians look to alternative ways to fill funding gaps. But in the latest of our One News Verian,
I wonder if any of those alternative ways are not giving $3 billion back to landlords and $14 billion in tax cuts. I wonder if that's a potential alternative income for them.
Where did this funding gap come from?
Yeah.
in polls, the majority of people surveyed say they don't support any further asset sales. Business correspondent Katie Bradford has the details.
In the 1980s, the then Labour government hocked off much of the family silver.
At the end of the day, it's price.
In 1993,
Thanks, Roger.
National sold off what was left, New Zealand Rail.
This was the best bid. It represented the best value to the Crown.
But in the 2000s, Helen Clark's government bought it back.
Your new rail company's name, Chewie Rail.
Wasn't it like for $1 or something? Didn't she buy it back, or they paid for the tracks or something? Do you remember?
There was, I can't remember the details off the top of my head. They ended up paying quite a bit for one part of it, and nothing for the other part.
Yeah, maybe it was $1 for the tracks or something like that, and they paid for things. It was a pretty good deal by Auntie Helen. We'll keep going.
And by 2013, there were major protests against John Key's partial privatisation of energy companies. It seems history does repeat. Now ACT leader David Seymour has reignited the debate, saying he'd like to sell off more assets. Christopher Luxon says he'd be open to the idea in a second term.
Just remember as well, Whānau, he does say that in a second term, but Christopher Luxon has not been trustworthy in the things he has promised so far. He has promised us in Dunedin a hospital pre-election, pulled out of it. He has promised a lot of things that they haven't come through and done. He also has done things that he hasn't promised and given any indication of. Hello, Smoke-Free 2025. So even though he says that now, and of course all his supporters, all his minions are going to go, but they said second term. I'm just earmarking it. They might have said that, and hopefully, if that's part of their plan, they're honest about it at the next election. But there's been other things that he's promised he hasn't done, and vice versa as well. So just be aware, keep it in the forefront.
The coalition government is not selling state assets this term. The National Party hasn't formed a view on that.
Voters, though, not so sure. In the latest One News Verian poll, we asked, in principle, do you support or oppose greater privatisation? 32% support, 56% oppose, 12% don't know.
So very often the apparent benefits of privatisation don't actually stack up. I think the public has seen that time and again, and that's why they're sceptical.
The debate is in the early stages, so no company is in the government's firing line yet.
Where you ask, why do we own QV, a property valuation company? That's not something the government of New Zealand needs to do, but that's just an example. Actually, the government has underway a process of evaluating the public purpose of owning different companies.
His coalition partner has long opposed asset sales, Winston Peters making his view clear during 2012.
I said this last night, Clint. I did throw up in the back of my mouth just a little bit, looking at the kind of three-headed hydra that is this government, that it appears that maybe with Luxon having no spine and Seymour being a petulant brat, that I'm going to say it again, I'm going to try not to a little bit, that maybe some of these things, I know this grates, but sometimes Peters might be the only adult in the room. It might be the case when it comes to privatisation.
Yeah. Well, I was an ministerial advisor for a bit in this 17-20 term, and Peters was in government with us. And, I don't agree with everything he did, but, in my area, he helped save the electrification of the main trunk line, which the Nats were about to get rid of.
Right.
He helped ensure that money. I sat down in the meeting and he said, we're not going back on this. Ironically, he said we're meant to be reducing our carbon emissions. We can't be going from electric to diesel. I'm not sure he'd say that anymore, but
Shane Jones surely fucking wouldn't say that.
Yeah, but I mean, there's some things there's lots of things that I don't agree with Winston, but he's been solid on privatisation. Remember, he walked away from government last time he was in with the Nats over privatisation of Wellington Airport.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting at the next election if we have the same sort of consortium talking. I wonder if he'll make privatisation a bottom line. I won't go into government with someone who wants to privatise. It could be. It could be. And can I just say, the only thing that's worse than me saying I might throw up a little bit is seeing someone calling themselves stink piss vomiting. I mean, just the idea of someone called stink piss also vomiting, that's the one thing that's worse. We're a real professional outfit here, Clint. This is how we roll, baby. Let's keep going, eh?
Protest and today.
You know our party's position from the day of its foundation a long time ago. We've never changed on those matters.
The very policy that
Get him,
has
Kieran.
led to unaffordable energy bills because John Key sold 49% of the power companies, apparently the solution to that is to sell the rest.
I mean, come on. Kieran McAnulty for the win. I was talking to an electric company today, just talking about rolling over, and they're all the same as well. My bill for last month, about 1,030 kilowatts we used, which is more than a lot of people do over summer, although I have been away because this is based in the building, all this stuff. And I phoned up another company and said how much, and it was 16 cents difference. I'm just like, okay, so there's no competition either. It is what it is to pay the power in this day and age. But what a great thing. The reason the prices have gone up is because by law they have to return a profit. They're returning a profit. It's costing us more, and their solution is, should we sell the rest? Maybe that's the solution. Very good pickup by Kieran.
And with the partially privatised and just the way it's structured, the power companies have every incentive to keep the system at the edge of shortage, so they can have prices as high as possible. This is another one of my interests, and I was looking at the futures market, which is most industrial users and large commercial users buy futures rather than buying on the spot market, and it's currently at $250 a megawatt. A few years ago that was 80. So no wonder all those large mills and everyone are closing down, because they've basically had their power prices triple since the partial privatisation.
We also have to remember what these guys have said. And I remember, I was young at the time and I wasn't really engaged, but I can still remember Uncle Winnie talking about this fantastic thing, the gold card that's coming on, and this fantastic gold card was going to give seniors cheaper power prices because the government owned the power companies. That never eventuated, but that couldn't eventuate now because they have to produce a profit. So people, if you're in a mid Canterbury and you're in an absolute freezing cold winter, there is no recourse from this government. They can't help you because they have to return a profit. Not the government, but the 49.999% shareholders. They want money back for that. So, all right.
I was just going to say, you notice Labour here and New Zealand First on the same page, and that's something that everyone's going to have to consider. If they are going to go, if the Nats and ACT are going to go into the election on asset sales, then Labour's going to have to consider how it relates to New Zealand First, and what space it can find for New Zealand First in its heart after having ruled them out in 23, because don't agree with everything that New Zealand First stands for, but on things like this, that they're pretty aligned, so they're going to have to have a think about that.
All right, let's go.
It is dumb.
There have been some success stories, but Max Rashbrook says most privatisations, partial or otherwise, have failed.
It's like a short-term sugar hit. It puts some more money in the government coffers, but of course what it does is it takes an asset out of public ownership, and then you've done it once, there's no more money coming in, and it doesn't really resolve any of your long-term problems.
A debate over the family silver that seemingly never loses its shine.
Yes. Now, privatisation is an interesting one, because I think in an ideal world, with whether it's the government or whether it's your own little house, your own little economy, in an ideal world, you keep and you buy again. So if we all could have done this, kept our first house, rented it, bought again, we'd be better off because we'd be building wealth. The same can be said for the government. In an ideal world, I think you keep and borrow. But I still like to ask the question, privatisation for what? Like, because I remember when National talked about it, and I'm pretty sure I probably almost have the quote exactly right. It was painting hospitals and schools. It was doing some things that would have been needed to get done in 25 years, maybe building some prefabs or something. And so in other words, selling half of the power companies to paint some places, that's a stupid payoff. Because what happens in 50 years when they're going to get painted again? You've lost those assets. Much more sensible to borrow. However, I also think that if you've got a piece of land with a couple of, Kainga houses on it worth $3 million because it's been there forever and it's now in a desirable place, and obviously without displacing families or anything, but there is an availability to sell that and maybe build 10 others, then that's not necessarily a bad payoff. So I at least always ask the question, privatisation for what? What's the payoff? But to be honest, National has never really been able to answer that second part, because it always seems to have been, as Max just said, sugar hits and not helped us long-term, Clint.
Yeah. Well, they always promise that the rigours of privatisation will mean more efficiency and lower prices and all that. And I don't think anyone seriously believed that, in 25 years, 35 years. So I think it's interesting that they keep on mentioning quotable value, QV, as this example of what they could privatise, because why does the government own a housing valuation company? And they've obviously sort of selected it because it's not many people probably realise that the government owns that, and it sounds a bit odd. But then when you think about it, well, how do the councils get the valuations on the properties that form the rating base?
Yeah.
I believe that's QV. And so what happens if QV is privatised? But the prices to council go up, don't they? And it's like you say, it's the short sugar hit. They purposely run the government into a huge deficit, and now they're saying there's no money. And so they're going, well, we need to get some money from somewhere, so we'll sell the assets. But like you say, future investment fund, they called it when they sold off the power company shares, and what did we see for it? So things that needed to happen anyway should have happened anyway, and would have been cheaper to the government to borrow at sovereign rates rather than sell down a successful asset.